Good morning. All right, good morning. Let's start slower. You're most welcome to the press conference of the European Union Election Observation Mission to Lesotho 2022. My name is Kimmo Räntilä. I'm the press officer of the mission, and I come from Finland. This event will be filmed or is already being filmed and also streamed online. If you don't want to be filmed for some reason or photographed, please contact the press office at the back and you will be told what to do. After this event, the chief observer has some time for separate interviews. Again, if there's a need for separate interview with the chief observer, please contact the press office back there or me after this press conference. I'm glad to see so many familiar faces. This is our third press conference in a row. Also, dear newcomers, there are wonderful places here in the front, and also if you want to move to the front row from the back, please feel free to do so. We have here today our chief observer, Ignazio Corrao, a member of the European Parliament from Italy, Deputy Chief Observer Armin Rabic from Austria, and our election analyst Vanya Angelova from Bulgaria. First, Chief Observer Ignazio Corrao will give a short presentation of our findings. Then there will be time for questions, as is normally the way in press conferences. Raise your hand and I'll give you the floor. When asking questions, please wait for a microphone to arrive to you. We have two microphones on the sides. They are moving with our people here. Then please introduce yourself and also tell us which media outlet you represent. And also, if not earlier, at last. Now, please silence your mobile phones. And now, Chief Observer Ignazio Corrao, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kimmo. Well, Bome e le bontate. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We are here today to present the final report. This document is not, and this is a document that is not about figures or numbers, but is the final act of a work developed by experienced people who were here in the country for months with the aim to help the whole electoral process for the future. That's the third time for me here in the kingdom, and I can say that I'm impressed of all the peaceful transition over the last months and to observe an overall well-conducted electoral process. As you may remember, this started with an invitation of the government of Lesotho, an exploratory mission that arrived here in March. Then the team of experts arrived in August. I came in September with the long-term observers to launch the mission. And then for the election week, we had 87 international observers that enabled us to observe all around the 10 districts and 80 constituencies. So we had quite a comprehensive oversight on the electoral process. This was also the first time that we had both a media monitoring team and a social media monitoring team. And that allowed us to observe in a very comprehensive and systematic manner for the very first time here in Lesotho. Let me remind you that this was the first ever electoral observation mission deployed by the European Union here in Lesotho, and the European Union has done more than 160 electoral observation missions in more than 60 countries. So first time here is a milestone in the relation between the Mountain Kingdom and the European Union. Last time we met, it was shortly after the election day, and we discussed about the preliminary report when there were quite positive assessment about the election. So those findings are confirmed now in the final report, but of course we have some addition. This report is, I I also remind you this report is written according to international standards and regional commitments that the Kingdom of Lesotho has signed and has committed to. It's got inclusive, objective, and neutral analysis of the electoral processes. So you had some positive assessment, and now you may think, so what did you observe? What did you write in this report? Well, actually, there have been some shortcomings, and there is room for improvement of the election. And this is why we are here today. It is with great pleasure to present you the mission final report, which is this. And where, as I said, the fundamental freedoms were largely respected during the electoral campaign and the elections. But, for example, when we look at the Basotho media, many media were constrained by limited resources and interference in editorial independence. Another concern is about the election preparation that were conducted on time but were difficult to implement due to legal uncertainty and limited funding. This especially affected voter registration and voter education. Voter education activities had to be reduced from 3 months to only 3 weeks. The constituency and polling station of some voters changed late in the process, something that can be easily avoided in the future with some improvements in the organization. A broad range of political parties competed in a peaceful campaign and accepted the outcome of election peacefully. However, the playing field was not even to everybody. This is mainly due to unregulated campaign finance, which lacks both transparency and oversight. This mission, the European Union Electoral Observation Mission, provides with this report a total of 21 recommendations for improving the electoral process. We consider 7 of these recommendations to be of primary importance. So let me explain these 7 key recommendations in more details. First one, we are concerns about in the election. The first concern for us in the election was the low turnout. Voter turnout for this election was lower than 38%, the lowest since the country's independence. To tackle the problem, which is a big problem for democracy, we believe that strengthening continuous civic education is the key. We underline that for this election, the Independent Electoral Commission didn't have the resources to do timely voter education campaigns. But it is not only about campaigns just before the election, it is also about how much the Basotho people know about the fundamental rights. This includes the freedom of speech, the freedom to assemble, the freedom to stand as a candidate. We see that schools and education are key. A lot can be done also online when the idea is right and the resources are there. Voter education programs need to focus on youth, women, and people with disabilities. The higher is the turnout, the higher is the participation and awareness of civil rights, the healthier is the state of democracy in the country. Second recommendation, our observers in the field observed problems that were caused by the inaccuracy of the voter register, as I was mentioning before. Some people didn't find their names in the register and were not able to vote. There were reports on deceased people being present in the voter register. There were also double entries of voters. Then young voters were underrepresented in the register. So as soon as possible, Lesotho needs a voter register that is accurate and includes everybody who has the right to vote. Independent Electoral Commission is the institution responsible for that. Third point is the lack of sufficient funds for the IEC. When it comes to election, the Independent Electoral Commission is the institution administrating the election, as you know. For this election, one of the biggest challenges was the lack of sufficient funds for the preparation and conduct of elections. Funding came late in the process and was released on a weekly basis. Last week, we met the Independent Electoral Commission, and we're told poll workers have been paid, but party agents and some suppliers are still waiting for their money. We recommend that the budget is directly given to the IEC in a timely manner. The IEC needs to be able to plan and execute all its activities independently with agreed requirements of transparency and accountability. Fourth point, the IEC also has a right to provide secondary legislation. These are regulation and rules of procedures. So far, IEC decisions lacked formality and have not been made public. So we recommend that the IEC uses its right to provide secondary legislation. The IEC could also formally publish all its decisions and the rules of procedures. This will increase its transparency and credibility. Fifth point, the IEC also has the task to oversee campaign finance, but it lacks financial and human resources to actually do that. We recommend to enable the IEC to effectively perform this task, and we also recommend that the task is extended to supervise all political parties' expenses and donations they receive. This is to ensure effective transparency of party and campaign finance. Recommendation number 6 is a level playing field. In Lesotho, as in every country, there are big political parties and small political parties. There are rich candidates and there are poor candidates that stand alone. There are candidates backed by a party and there are independent candidates who fight alone. The key democratic concept here is a level playing field. Now, the Lesotho electoral law does not put a limit to campaign expenditures, and it does not define what constitutes an electoral campaign. If you have the resources, you can spend as much as you wish. Also, the law doesn't require the parties and candidates to reveal the sources of the donation they receive. So we recommend the reasonable limitation of political campaign expenditures could be introduced. This to safeguard Basotho democracy and level the playing field for small parties and independent candidates. Also, we recommend that all use of state resources in campaigning to be prohibited. A good example is the use of government vehicles for campaign purposes. Our observers witnessed that, and they did it all over the country, actually. So, according to present laws, this is not illegal, but however, we consider it as not a good practice. That's why we recommend to prohibit the use of state resources in campaigning. Seventh is the role of the Lesotho Communication Authority. Democracy relies on strong and independent institutions. And when it comes to communication, the governing and supervising body in Lesotho is the LCA, the Lesotho Communication Authority. In order to guarantee the freedom of speech, this body needs to be independent from the government and the parties. That means that it must be public, but not under the control of a government or a party. It needs to supervise autonomously all media. So we recommend that the independence of that authority is strengthened, and we highlight that there is a need to renew the appointment mechanism of its board. As I was saying, we had these 7 key priorities, but the recommendation that you can find in the report are 21. So among these 21 recommendations, we also suggest to avoid late legal changes 6 months before election. This to enable proper implementation and fair campaign condition, to make sure that voters, parties, stakeholders have a clear understanding of what the electoral law applicable is. This was a problem that we observed with in this election with the omnibus bill in the part that was concerning the electoral law. We also recommend to strengthen the representation of women in the institution. So in that regard, we suggest to keep the zebra system in the proportional representation system. We suggest to improve accessibility for persons with disabilities, as I was mentioning before. As our observers reported, how many people with disabilities were not able to actually access to polling station during election day. You can find all this recommendation outlined in more detail in this report. You will see it, they're listed. And there is also assigned to the institution the related form, is related to the recommendation. We also offer a translation of the report in Lesotho language and on our website, which can be useful for your people. To conclude, Lesotho is, I see the country is already a different country since I first arrived here in September. I can see that there is a new Prime Minister, very proactive, first woman Deputy Prime Minister, a lean 15 members of government, and very ambitious 20 points reforms agenda. I can feel there is a very positive environment in the country. The post-electoral period was very peaceful. Parties accepted the outcome of the election, and this appears to be the best time to embrace electoral reforms. The European Union Electoral Observation Missions provides the Lesotho nation with these well-intended recommendations that were drafted by experienced people following a method, international standards, and after following extensive consultations. It is now on the Independent Electoral Commission, the new members of Parliament, and the new government to fix the roof while the sun is shining, as it's actually probably raining now, but the sun will come back later. For this Friday, so we are providing the report to all these institutions, to every member of the parliament, and for this Friday we invite key players to a round table to discuss how to implement this recommendation in the next month. Let me emphasize finally that the European Union is there to support the Lesotho people in this path of reforms. And good luck, and thank you for your attention. Kaliboa.
Kaliboa, Chief Observer Ignazio Corrao. Now the floor is yours, dear representatives of the media. Questions? There in the very back I can see one hand. So, please. Yes. But the microphone. Now we have a microphone. Who was the one who wanted to ask something? Somewhere there in the back. Yes, please.
Mogolwane Rama Inwane mo Africa FM. Mogolwane Rama Inwane mo Africa FM. My first question is, it is the first time since independence that you guys are here. So could you please elaborate as what made you, as the EU, to send an election observer mission in Lesotho? After, that's the first one. Secondly, after the publication of the preliminary report, you refused to have interviews with the radio in Lesotho, and one of the reasons was that none of the observers understood Sesotho. Funny enough, the radio stations broadcast in Sesotho, and there's also a report in Sesotho. So please help us understand that, and whether this time around you will accept to do radio interviews. To strengthen on that, coming to press conferences like this means that there is information asymmetry between the EU and those of us who receive the report. So we need also to go through the report so that we can ask you questions as and where we do not understand. So that's one of the reasons that we brought that. And there was also a clear discrepancies between the Sesotho preliminary report as well as the English one, particularly on the radio stations. Do help us understand as to why that is the case. Thank you.
Okay, so why we are here? So what was the process? It started with an invitation of the government of Lesotho to the European Union, and the European Union, the High Representative, the Vice President of the Commission, sent an exploratory mission in March, composed of experts in electoral observation mission, that stated that the mission was feasible, advisable, and useful. So after that exploratory mission, the observation mission was organized and deployed. As I was saying in the introductory speech, it started in August with the arrival of the experts, and then in September the observers joined, long-term observers and short-term observers, both. And we managed to be all around the 10 districts, the different areas of the country. And yeah, it was the first electoral observation mission. Means that what we've done here in these last months is a milestone also in the relation between the Mountain Kingdom and the European Union. I think that that shows interest and goodwill on our side towards the Mountain Kingdom. About the radio interview, I would give the floor to the Deputy Chief Observer, Armin Rabish, to answer.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Observer. About the request for a live interview in Sesotho language by Mo Africa FM, we extended the invitation to a meeting to explain to you our methodology and the international standards, regional commitments, according to which we are monitoring the media. And you did not take up this offer from our side. And in general, the EU election observation missions are not giving live interviews in a language we don't command. Regarding the methodology of the EU election observation mission, you will find in the final report, which you receive at the end of this press conference in hard copy, and there is also a Sesotho version online. And this report outlines in detail the findings of the media monitoring team of the mission. So our understanding is the first time that this was done in Lesotho. A 4-member media monitoring team with one very experienced media analyst looked into the aspects of digital media like the television, radio, but also the newspapers. You find the methodology and the monitoring results there. On top of that, we also had a social media monitoring and social media analyst with a social media monitoring team, and there's also an annex according to those results in the final report. Thank you.
Distribution of the report, so the last point. This is the normal methodology that we follow on election. Of course, during the speech, as you may have noticed, I already explained what are the 7 key priority, and 21 are listed here, of course. You will need some time to read it, but we are also here to clarify if there are doubts, generally speaking. The overall assessment, as I was saying, was quite positive, but still there are shortcomings and things that can be implemented for the future.
Chief Observer is leaving the country today, but the rest of us, we will stay this week. And when you get the final report, when leaving this event, please read it and come back to us if you need interviews or any more information. We are here to help you. I may answer myself the last question about the discrepancy in the translation, because I'm the translation chief or responsible for the translations. In the Lesotho language translation of the preliminary statement, we made a mistake, and when we found out the mistake, we immediately corrected it and published the right version. Happily, the numbers were not correct or totally correct in the wrong version, but the conclusions were correct. So we didn't have to change the text a bit. So that was, of course, a lamentable error from our part, and I take full responsibility. But the conclusions were not needed to. We didn't need to change them. All right. Next question. Yes, first row.
Otto Farankolo from the Post newspaper. 2 questions. First, I understand that part of your recommendations is for government to retain the zebra method, perhaps to have more women in parliament. Isn't it that a bit ironic, because just recently Basotho have made their opinion known about the matter. If you read plenary 2, they are clear that they don't want the method. They want the best loser method. So are you trying to push back, or will you embrace what Basotho as a nation want? Our understanding is EU funded the plenaries that went to people to get their opinion. Now the people have spoken. Are you pushing back the people? Okay. And then the second question is, you would by now know that elections are disputed or contested. There was a court case by IEC confessing to a trivial mistake. We know it was stricken off the roll, and they were told to go to the court of disputed return. We know that IEC is not intending to go to the court of disputed return, but I got confirmation from Council of BNP and BNP-sponsored candidate and BPP and BPP-sponsored candidate that this very morning, just before the press conference started, they were at court filing the urgent applications. What's your take on that?
On the zebra system and what we were mentioning about the representation of women, we absolutely don't say anything about the way it has to be done. So we mentioned the zebra system because it is the law that was applicable in this election. But if the parliament is sovereign, and if they want to change the electoral law, they can do the way they prefer. What we suggest is just think about the proportion and the gender balance. This is what the recommendation is about. You can do however you want. Even in the European Union, we have all different electoral system. The point is just the goal. The goal is to have gender balance. Of course, it's the people then to choose how, and the parliament representing the people is the one responsible to legislate on that. And about the court case, we cannot comment on ongoing process. I mean, we respect the institution and the internal procedures. Once it will be done, we can have an opinion on that. But now, with the court case ongoing, we can just say we can just wish good luck to the justice and the system. But it's not on us to comment what the internal judicial system of Lesotho is stating. Do you want to add something?
Chief Observer, you find in the final report which you receive after this press conference also a matrix at the annex of this final report. And it contextualizes the recommendations we are coming up with. And it also provides a follow-up which institution is responsible and whether there's any legal change necessary. There's also a reference to the international standards and regional commitments. So there is obligation on the side of Lesotho as party and part of SADC towards the equality of women and men in political representation. And with this in mind, we are coming up with recommendations which have been also consulted with the various stakeholders, including the United Nations, the civil society organizations, women organizations. And that is why we recommend the CBER system to stay. It can be also combined with a best loser system. So that is also possible. Thank you.
First there and then there.
Thank you very much. My name is Mara Faila Motlubudi from Lesotho Times. Just out of interest, really, I just want to know, given Lesotho's terrain and knowing that it comprises 10 districts, how many were you able to cover and what were the common findings? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We were able to cover all of them. I personally went and visited all 10 districts in election week to join the long-term observer and the short-term observer that were deployed all over the country. Actually, for election day, we were able to observe all over the 80 constituencies, so not only the 10 districts. The 10 districts I did it myself, but we had observers all over the 80 constituencies. That's why I think that the report is quite comprehensive, because it gave us quite complete oversight on the different areas of the country. Because of course, I mean, things might be different compared from the city, the capital, and some rural areas on other areas on the country.
All right, next question is there. Can I please ask you to rise up as well? Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Peleman Kutu is my name, and I'm from the IEC. So I just wanted, mine is more of a clarification to a factual error that was made by one of the media houses when they asked you a question. We were just given an emphatical response to the effect that IEC will not be going to the Court of Disputed Return. And I want to align myself with recommendation number 7 and its importance in making sure that issues around proper reporting, are emphasized for us as the Basotho nation, because sometimes misinformation spreads. Can I be protected, please? So there's been, this is absolute misinformation. We are here to outline, and imagine if I was not here as the IEC, many people would be walking out of this room under a false notion that we will not be going to the Court of Disputed Return. That would be tantamount to us actually abandoning the very cause where we are seeking the court to actually intervene. Thank you very much.
You want to comment?
Thank you for the clarification. It's an exercise of democracy to have debates also here.
All right, next question. There. Yes, please.
Lastly, you spoke in your recommendations about the independence of LCA. And I would like to know if of the radio stations that were used as sample data, was the LCA and those radio stations made aware? That's one of the questions that I would love for you guys to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. We follow a sophisticated methodology when it comes to media monitoring, which has been developed over the years and over time by the European Union, which has been observing elections in more than 60 countries and in 160 election observation missions in total. So the media monitoring is always done according to a standard methodology, and it is on the media analyst to select the media houses and the media which will be monitored, whether that's radio stations, newspapers, or television. So it's not which is something which is done in coordination or in cooperation with the local or national regulator. Yeah, this is an independent methodology, and we are making our own conclusions about which media houses and which media to monitor. However, the media analyst has been in a very good relation and in a constant relationship with the LCA and also with LTV, and has met several times with the LCA, and that's also the reason why we considered this a priority recommendation to strengthen the independence of the Lesotho Communications Authority and to have a functioning board. Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Speaking of an inclusive parliament, with regard to the other recommendation you made, a huge population of the Basotho nation is youth. Is there any recommendation with regard to how the participation and numeracy of young people could be in parliament?
I think this question is related with the recommendation number 1, when we say that there's a need to do something to work on the lower turnout of the election, and this has something to do with young people and their education and awareness of fundamental rights. So what we suggest in the report, especially on the IEC, is to strengthen the mechanism of voter education and to do also more, generally speaking, in schools and in social activities in order to raise awareness on the fundamental rights. Also, the right is expressly mentioned in the report to stand as a candidate. Probably many young people are not completely aware that they have the chance, the possibility to stand up and fight for their ideas and some change that might in mind. So this needs to be strengthened by public activities, probably with more funding on it, even with the use of social media, internet, which is a powerful mean, quite that is accessible financially speaking. Vanya, you want to add?
I would just like to add something. In terms of participation of young voters in these elections, we also, in our recommendation that we include to the IEC, to be more inclusive and proactive in engaging the youth in the elections as voters as well, because we noticed that the participation of young voters is quite low in this, has been quite low in the last elections. Therefore, we would like them to be more proactive and have special programs, voter information and education messages to the young voters.
Next one. Yes, there in the middle. And then in the back.
Galewo Mbesi from Newsday newspaper. My question is, are these recommendations binding? Will there be sanctions if they are not being implemented? Because I want to avoid ourselves to be coming here again in 2027 after elections and to listen to the same report that you are giving us now.
Well, as I was saying in the speech, these recommendations are based on the international standards and regional commitments that the Kingdom of Lesotho has signed, has committed to. So it should be, they should be followed, not because of us, not because we are saying that, but because the Kingdom of Lesotho is committed to those standards. What we will do, we will probably be back in the country. We will keep on cooperating. This is what we do. So we cooperate. We have a delegation of states here that cooperate on many matters. And speaking about electoral recommendation, we will probably be back in the country in a couple of years, so midterm, to see if those recommendations and those paths that we are trying to walk together with the government of and the institutions of Lesotho will be followed in the time. That's the methodology. That's what we do. Of course, I mean, we don't sanction. We don't have that, that function.
Yes, back row, please.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Sebolao from PCFM. So as you said that you see or sense something positive and this new Prime Minister is proactive. So what does that mean in comparison to the previous government? So if you see something positive in this new one, so I suppose as you are saying or talking about the recommendations, then that means or bring to us that as you go back to report to the European Union, then there are some recommendations that you're gonna say or to the European Union about their country. So what are the recommendations maybe as to assist our beloved country to develop maybe in terms of economy, democracy, and our well-being as Basotho? So we'd like very much to know the recommendations.
Of course, I mean, as I was saying, this is the first electoral observation mission ever in the country, so we don't really have any term of comparison with previous election year, and normally we don't compare election even in the same country. But the reason why I say it, of course, I mean, there is a new government, so there is a good environment, a good spirit of doing things. Then, of course, we will see in the future if those points of the agenda or those reforms will be done. What we stick to, speaking about the recommendation, is the electoral side. Because when it comes to other reforms and other important part of the Lesotho life, this is the European Union is also here to help, but this is a matter that will be discussed with the EU delegation, the ambassador that are here in the country, and cooperate with the government of Lesotho. They were cooperating with the previous one, they will be cooperating with the new one. Our points, our recommendations are focused on the electoral process. That, of course, electoral process is related with democracy, because if the election work well, that means that the state of democracy in the country is very good.
Next one, please. Next one, please. I may say, waiting for the next question, I may just tell you the information that after we stopped, there will be coffee and snacks outside, and you're invited to stay a little bit more, spend a little bit more time with us, and we will all be there. But now there's still a chance for some questions, if there is one or two. And if not, yes, please, we are happy to serve. Front row.
We had most of the recommendations about capacitating IEC with funding and many other things. But we know now that the IEC have confessed to a trivial error of applying a long-time election act. What is the recommendation with regard to the recruitment and capabilities of people working at IEC?
Okay, what we can say is that we explicitly say that there was a lack of funding on the IC. But we also say that with this shortcoming of funding, the process was managed in a professional way and the elections were held quite well. There are things that need to be improved, and we underline in to what extent they have to be improved, but then the organization, it's something that has to be done by the institution of Lesotho. We don't have any recommendation on that. We? Yeah, we underline. You see you can read in the reports what is to be improved in the management. I expressly say, for example, secondary legislation, but lack of funding to do something might be done in a better way, and it wasn't possible because there was a lack of funding. So we suggest to fund the IC and to give them the possibility to work independently.
I would like to add something else. As we mentioned, we have 21 recommendations. The ones that were read by our chief observers are only the priority. But there are other recommendations. You can have a copy of the report and look at it that are also related to the work of the IC, to different aspects of the work of the IC. And they're also very well explained and based on the grounded on facts. Thank you.
Something else? Perhaps one more question, if there is. Yes, there is one.
I am of the view that IEC started voters' education in June, but it said it started 3 weeks before elections. Does EU recognize voter education by CSOS only, not the one by IEC?
Yeah, when we say civic education, there's of course part of the job that might be done by civil society. So what is needed is that what we noticed when we said only 3 weeks instead of 3 months, this was because there was a lack of funding. So in the recommendation we said let's try to have better organization in terms of funding so that those kind of activities can be organized and developed in a timely manner. And of course there has to be the participation and the cooperation between the institution, in this case the Independent Electoral Commission, and the civil society that works on the field. So that's the suggestion. If you do that in a timely manner, that means that you have more people who are aware about the electoral process and of course also about their civic and fundamental rights. You want to say something?
To add on to that, since also a colleague of yours asked before what's the difficulties of the terrain in Lesotho, and that's the reason why we included the civic education component into the priority recommendations, as it is so important for young people to be educated already in schools at educational institutions on their political rights, as the chief observer already mentioned in his speech. Yeah, so it's not only the civil society which is responsible for that, but it is also the IEC, it's the ministries of government, and also other organizations which need to educate the electorate in their political rights to run in elections, to vote, to register, and with these well-intended, forward-looking recommendations, we think there can be a broader basis of electorate in the next elections, where more people participate in the elections because they know their right and they're more eager to register and vote in the elections.
Still some questions? In that case, we start to conclude. I'll repeat, if any of you have the need for a special interview, with the CEO, please contact our press office back there, or contact me when we end. We have now some coffee and snacks. We are not in a hurry. I hope you are neither. The official final report in hard copy will now be found at the back, and the Lesotho version you will find online. The links and addresses you will find in the press release, also at the back, and also in 2 languages. Grab a copy. Thank you and goodbye. The press conference ends now. Kaliboa.